So we've seen some pretty incredible science this morning. I think everybody agrees about that. And then we've talked about how that science gets translated into new discoveries and some of the difficulties in translating that science into products that actually advance human health. This next panel is exciting because it's bringing all of the ecosystem together. It is why we bring life science and real estate together, because every life science project needs a home. And the real estate developers build that home. So once the technology gets out, commercialized by a company, they need a place to incubate and grow. They need a place to get venture capital to continue to fuel their growth, and they need a place to live, and that's what this next panel is all about. Lou?
Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Lou Haas. I'm the CEO of our three related nonprofit organizations, the Hepatitis B Foundation, the Blumberg Institute, and the Pennsylvania Biotechnology Center. I'm going to ask each panelist just to introduce yourself and your where you work and your title. And there are, again, everything is in the bio. So start with Lorenzo.
Yeah, hi everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Lorenzo Pellegrini. I am the managing director, managing partner of the Hatch Biofund. Hatch Biofund is a venture capital firm, a relatively new venture capital firm based in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, at the Pennsylvania Biotechnology Center and at B Labs. My background, I have 10 years as a scientist on the bench, 10 years as a venture capitalist, and then 6 years as a biotech entrepreneur.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming out. Jeff Devano with Brandywine Realty Trust. We are a real estate investment trust. That means we're publicly traded, New York Stock Exchange. We develop, operate, or own and operate commercial properties, mixed use. So that's office, life science, residential, retail, conference, and alike. As I joke around, I've been with the company since the late 1900s, so I've had a lot of different roles. But we're based here in Philadelphia. We have operations in Austin, Texas, around DC, Maryland, Virginia. Our largest operations are in Austin, Texas, and Philadelphia. We just fortunately happen to be the largest landlord in both those submarkets. And I oversee our life science practice currently. Prior to that, I oversaw our operations here in Pennsylvania for a number of years.
My name is Matthew Burkhart. I'm the director at B Labs, which is an innovation space for early and growth stage companies developing novel therapeutics. Background in small molecule drug discovery, mostly CNS, and particularly rare disease indications, places like Merck and Novartis in Boston. Involved in the very early days of the stem cell space out in San Francisco, originally from Philadelphia. And essentially my role is to create the opportunities for therapeutic companies in Philadelphia to be successful.
Yeah, so as Nancy mentioned, this panel represents various parts of our ecosystem, which is part of the greater Philadelphia ecosystem. We're going to be discussing how the model works, along with the challenges and obstacles that we face at times. Just a little bit about the Pennsylvania Biotechnology Center, who I kind of feel like we're related in different relationships with everyone up here on the panel. But we're a life sciences incubator located up in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. We've been around for almost 20 years. We have 50 companies up there. We've had quite a bit of success with a bunch of IPOs and a few $1 billion worth of company value created. It's really a model that's based on co-collaborations and services. We really want to nurture the companies. We want to provide everything we can so that they are successful. And a few years ago, 2022, we partnered with Brandywine Realty Trust. We wanted to continue replicating our model. Again, we're a nonprofit. We really want to help these companies get to where they need to be so that we'll help out the rest of our environment and hopefully everyone here in this room and elsewhere. B Labs is at the Schuylkill Yard. It's at the Sierra Center. We kicked off and had a tremendous start. And through the process, we have these different parts that connect in different ways. And to start with, we wouldn't have an ecosystem if it wasn't for the space. So I want to ask Jeff, can you describe Brandywine, who is known for great commercial real estate buildings, why you pivoted to the life sciences space and the vision and value of this ecosystem?
Sure. So Brandywine's background, just as a point of reference, I'll talk about why we pivoted to life science And I say a pivot, we were in that business, but it was more a change to a business development or progressive, proactive approach versus responsive. So we went from a suburban REIT in Philadelphia, a real estate company, ultimately moved downtown to Philadelphia, ultimately moved to Austin, Texas, ultimately moved to DC. And through that time, we went from commercial real estate to mixed-use product to commercial, meaning retail and residential and apartments and conference centers. So we pivoted to life science because the demand for our product, physical space, is driven by job growth. It's just that simple. So Philadelphia over the last 10 years has, depending on who you talk to, roughly about 100,000 new jobs in the last 10 years. The largest sector of that job growth is in the life science and tech area. Somewhere about 16,000 jobs just alone in the last 5 years. So the development that started us in Philadelphia was Cira Center at 30th Street Station. That was a partnership with Amtrak. We then moved on to a partnership with the University of Pennsylvania with Cira South, where FMC Tower is, where Glaxo is now based. And then the last partnership has been with Drexel in Schuylkill Yards, which is a multi-phase, multi-year, multi-million square foot development. The original strategy put together by our CEO and founder of the company, Jerry Sweeney, when you looked at that information or the brochures 5 or 6 years ago, it was simply about 5 million square feet, aggregate square footage. Most of that was office space, call it 3 or 4 million, call it 500,000, 1 million square feet of residential, retail, and other mixed. The job market has certainly changed for traditional office workers. So the pivot was naturally to shift from office to life science. So if you look at that today, those numbers have completely reversed. Life science is a development somewhere in the 3 to 4 million square feet range overall and over time. So we decided to be proactive in that business. We were fortunate enough to benefit from Spark Therapeutics and Dr. Kathy High's invention or cure for childhood blindness, and then the eventual transition to Roche through that team. And so what we decided to do is focus on it in a big way. So everybody has a product in this room, whether or not it's a scientific asset or it services to that business. So what we needed to do was, we're fortunate enough with Brandywine, we're the largest owner of commercial space in Philadelphia. We're also the largest owner of commercial space in Austin, Texas. So it gives us the benefit of some scale. So first we make the decision to focus on this business, so then how do we go about it? We can't do it alone. So we have the benefit of scale. So we took Cira Center, which is the conversion of a traditional office building, to make it lab ready. But it's not we're one and done with one building. We have a multi-phase cycle to this. So most landlords scratch their head and say, why did Brandywine team up with PA Biotech and Matthew and Lorenzo and build an incubator? That's because we have a little different perspective, and we wanted to help create an ecosystem in this market that could accommodate everyone from early stage through to graduate labs, which we also have being built in Cira Center, and to the enterprise or platform spaces in 3025 JFK and 3151. So we wanted to create a platform that would create an opportunity for companies who go into business with the expectation of growth, but they can't project that growth with any reliability, and they need resources. So we met with Lou. It was an opportunity for him to build his franchise and build their first franchise outside of Doylestown. So we have the incubator, which can take people as little as one bench, as many as 190. And then you move on to the graduate labs. And then through Matthew, we've worked out some service agreements. So we have like a vivarium being built in one of our buildings nearby, so our companies can use those resources. So what we tried to do is create an ecosystem for startups in this region that would eventually grow here and then go into more traditional space.
Which is a huge advantage of other markets, where you could actually start with a bench at B Labs and commercialize within a block or two. I think that's a great opportunity. Matthew, speaking of your background, very interesting journey to B Labs, you've had some experience with early stage startups. What are some of those experiences that you've learned along the way that you've applied to the incubator?
I mean, our interaction with companies in the incubator, at the moment, it's a little limited, right? 2 years ago when we started, demand for space in Philadelphia was such that you had kind of larger, later stage companies looking for operational capabilities. So we're kind of this odd split between large, later stage companies, public, clinical stage, legitimate pipelines, very experienced scientific and business teams. They don't look to us for much. We do have smaller, earlier stage companies that are beginning operations, let's say. As we continue to grow, I think our activity with startups and interaction with them, ideally we do want that to grow. I think one of the biggest benefits coming from backgrounds in Boston and San Francisco is that you have these very strong, robust, experienced communities where people interact really across at all stages, from formation to later stages into clinical. As that type of community grows here in Philadelphia and those connections get made across parties, I think our activity with these startups will start to resemble a little bit more of those types of activities.
Great, thanks. Lorenzo, as the money guy on the panel, maybe you could explain a little bit about the Hatch Bio Fund, what led you here, and your interactions between our little ecosystem here.
Thanks, Lou. So I'm the money guy on the panel, or as my kids say, I'm the professional drug dealer. I've been trying to explain to them many, many times what we do in venture capital, investing in companies developing drugs, and then trying to find a buyer for those companies, and they concluded, no, you're just a drug dealer. Hatch Bio Fund has a very interesting model. It's a new, still small venture capital fund, but we have a big ambition, big growth plans going forward. We are tethered. We were the brainchild of Lou and Dr. Tim Block at the Biotechnology Center in Doylestown. And the idea was to really bring in money into the incubators plural, in order to help the companies grow. But at the same time, and I think this is probably an understated goal or understated need with the companies, the ability to have a counterpart in-house that you can talk to anytime within the incubator, somebody who speaks a different language, who has a different perspective, who speaks the money language, as Lou said. That's very important, I think, because scientists are excellent at doing a certain part, taking care of a certain part of a drug development process, but then at some point you need the money guys to come in and say, okay, do this, don't do that. And our co-location at the Biotechnology Center in Doylestown and at B Labs allows us to really work together with the companies, follow them over not just weeks or one interaction or two, but the interaction becomes extended over time, over years, in fact. And so we can really see, which companies have the best chances for success and follow them along this critical stage. So it's a very neat idea, and specifically the intervention also, the enabling intervention of Brandywine and Daiichi Sankyo, the global leading Japanese pharmaceutical company, who became anchor investors and our partners also in our work in Hatch Bio Fund, were also very, very critical. So you have all these ingredients. You have the incubators, the companies, the technologies. You even have potential acquirers or the expert guidance from this established pharmaceutical company that allows us to coach our companies in a much better way. And you have the environments also being built. So you have all these elements. The one part that was missing, this missing piece in this beautiful puzzle, was really the capital. And so that's what we provide. But I think we are quite realistic about our capacity right now. We are a relatively new fund, and we're not a big fund by any stretch of the imagination. But
Not yet.
Not yet. But going forward, if we're successful, then we can raise another fund and then another and another, and then we can start to change the narrative here in Philadelphia about the availability of venture capital. We can talk about it later. Because that's, I think, one of the biggest needs that we have here in the city, in the greater Philadelphia. I guess let's define that as, Eagles country. So our goal is to invest in the companies coming out of the incubators, but also any company here in Eagles country. As long as you're developing human therapeutics, we want to talk to you, and maybe we will not invest. I think Eric quoted some statistics. It's really difficult to secure venture capital investments. But even if we don't, hopefully the interaction will be helpful to everybody, and we'll all be better off as a result of that.
So no investment in Cowboys fans, just for the record. We want to put that out there.
Or Jets.
Or Jets.
And I also want to mention, I think I saw in the room, Vlad Welko's here. He actually was a big part of getting Hatch Biofund off the ground. And I'm glad you mentioned Daiichi, because having a pharmaceutical company, and I know Michael's going to be giving a keynote later, it just brings a lot of expertise and credibility to our ecosystem. And that leads me to my next questions for the panel. What other, you can see the ecosystem developing, it's organic, I think it's growing. What other partnerships and collaborations do you think that we need to try next? Jeff?
Well, I think these two guys should probably talk about that for a minute.
So there are at least 20 sites or cities or regions around the world that are trying to do what Boston did, what San Francisco did, what San Diego did. And they all come at this with different strengths. And Philadelphia is uniquely positioned to really be the next contender in this global race for biotech domination, so to speak. But one thing that probably we are lacking here in the city, among other things I'm going to be talking about, is management that has done it before, 3 or 4 or 5 times. If you go to a reception, I think you were telling me this, Lou, you go to a biotech reception in Boston, and you'll meet entrepreneurs who have 4 companies in their resumes that they have already, either they worked at or sold and moved on, exited. And so that's the kind of environment that I think we want to have here 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. So we have excellent managers from Big Pharma. Big Pharma is still around here. We have excellent scientists and company founders, but perhaps we need to develop that second tier, so the expert biotech entrepreneur, and it's a particular skill that is required there, because these people need to bridge through so many disciplines, right? And so when it comes to figuring out what partnerships, what other initiatives we should try to develop, that would be something along those lines. Programs that try to recruit people back in the region, because this is where the companies are. Programs that provide education to these executives and things of that nature. And I'll stop here because I'm venturing territory that is I'm not familiar with.
And Matthew, I know you've been the location of B Labs and Sears Center. It's right on the doorstep of University City. 2 parts for you. One, what are some of the collaborations that you're trying to work on within University City and elsewhere in Philadelphia? And then 2, we've been very fortunate to get what's called an Academic Innovation Zone grant from the state of Pennsylvania, which allows us to help take academic technologies and company building, essentially. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah, for the first part, I mean, look, it's no mystery. You have a proximity of a number of parties that usually make particular new therapeutic companies successful, right? We can rehash the Kendall Square story. You just pack people into as few square blocks as you possibly can, and it just creates an environment of success. And so ideally that can be replicated, let's call it from 30th to 38th and a few blocks over, including hospitals over to Drexel. Look, I think the more you get all those parties to interact, clinicians to foundation and VC, and everyone in between, the better off it's going to be. That's usually what has happened in a number of these other ecosystems that Lorenzo has mentioned. So that's really all we're looking to do at B Labs, is to create those connections and relationships. And it doesn't have to be formal with us. I will take any call. I won't respond to any email. It may be 30 seconds and maybe a hard no if it's just not a fit, but, I'm going for a coffee this afternoon with a woman starting a company over at Penn. I'm talking with a woman from MIT on the phone tomorrow who's interested in starting a company. So, like I said, I will spread conversations far and wide in order to start to try to aggregate those people interested in growing the life sciences in Philadelphia. From the AIZ grant perspective, it actually goes to some of the earlier conversations on different panels. I think, there are a number of new emerging strategies to identify new targets, new therapeutics, new modalities. I think Philadelphia's, put a heavy wager into cell therapy, gene therapy, and rightly so, with a lot of the clinical benefits, commercial benefits. We'll see how that pans out. But I think one thing that has been interesting and perhaps underrepresented in Philadelphia is an artificial intelligence machine learning approach. I hesitate to use those terms now. But it's essentially that diversity of an ecosystem in companies developing novel approaches to solving therapeutic problems that we want to attract here in Philadelphia. So as part of that grant program, we'll have a company that has a presence in the UK, in Toronto, as well as on the West Coast. They will open up a Philadelphia location here. Jesse Johnson, CTO of that company called Cerna Bio, apologizes for not being here. He's in Boston. I can't guarantee he's a Patriots fan. But look, again, very experienced individual working at kind of tech-first companies in the biology space and different pluses and minuses to that. Verily, DewPoint, Celerity, which is an interesting one. But again, it's just bringing companies and individuals who have expertise, diversifying the ecosystem in Philadelphia. In general, as a broad comment, a more diverse ecosystem is generally a healthier one.
I agree. Jeff?
Yeah, if I could just add to Lorenzo and Matthew's comments. Lorenzo touched on the executive teams that'll take this out of the lab and turn into a business. And I think everybody recognizes the data here. So from a macro level, from Brandywine's perspective, here's what we think. There's some holes that we all can collectively in this room work on, because some people are scientific in nature and drug discovery, and some people are vendors that supply and support these teams, and some people are on the business side. So we have a huge pharma base here, which is why, in my opinion, P8 Biotech in Doylestown was so successful. You had a lot of executives and a lot of scientists aggregated in a small area, didn't turn into Kimball Square, as Matthew joked around, but it really is a beehive of activity that's had some extraordinary success over the last 15 and plus years, because it had a combination of scientists, business people, capital coming in, and physical space. And a platform from a real estate perspective was supported by people like Matthew and Lorenzo and others to help people start their companies and figure it all out until they had successful outcomes. But the other piece of it is the frustrating part on my side, because Jerry's invested billions of dollars in this market with the idea that it has all the ingredients to be outrageously successful. But the tech transfer offices in this community need to, in our opinion, really accelerate their process, simplify it, make it very transparent so outsiders like Lorenzo and Matthew can talk to different people and help move that science forward. But it really comes down to, so we have physical real estate, that's easy. There's a timing issue associated with that. We have very strong operators that have history throughout that. We have the incubator support systems, we have private equity there, we have big pharma as an employee base, you have the universities with the demographics coming out and support that. But there's just not in my opinion, we're not there cohesively enough, communicating together, working together, advocating, and at a state level, if this city and this state wants to be successful, Mass Bio's program, where they organized $1 billion, $100 million invested every year. Anytime we talk to anybody from the Commonwealth, and if you have access to those people, hit them hard, that's how we'll be successful. Because, as Matthew joked, we're starting early on. If you're a private equity firm in Boston, I'm making up a number, you're gonna see 80 deals a month, or 30 deals a month maybe. In Philadelphia, you might see 3 to 10. Eric had a good stat in Doylestown. He's probably looking at a national search, but there just needs to be more activity here. So we can handle everything once those companies get started, but we have to help them start, and we need to do that through technology transfer, entrepreneurship in the universities and the healthcare systems, and then bring in the private equity.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add on to that comment, and I know Nancy, we talked last year, we need more pharma. I think next year, when I go down to North Carolina or when I go to Massachusetts or California, you see elected officials at events like this. And that shows the commitment and the support. And one of the things as you go across the country, I'm sure many in this room know, is, our state, it's tough to compete with the other states, just even across the river. From the incubator perspective, and I know Jeff's probably dealt with it too, the incentive programs just in New Jersey, our neighbor, Maryland, Delaware, then if you go up to Boston, we need a significant statement. And I do believe, there's hope on the horizon. I think the new governor has this as one of his initiatives. So hopefully we'll expect something within a year. I don't know if it's going to be the $1 billion, but half would be nice.
Gotta think big, brother. Gotta think big.
100 million would be nice, but that's something that will really, when we talk about the ecosystem and the greater Philadelphia region and Pennsylvania, that's the tipping point for us. If we can get that push from our government, that will push us over the edge.
And for the record, we asked the state for $1 billion. They gave us $5 million.
Yeah.
It's a start, though. So if we show some progress through some economic development and job increase.
You should have asked for $10 billion.
So I know we're going to be doing Q&A in a second here. One more question. I wanted to talk about just a quick little shift here about the economic environment, because right now it's tough and how it's impacting our ecosystem. The Philadelphia Business Journal just reported last week there's been over 500 jobs cut since 2022 as companies are struggling with fundraising. So to the panel, how is this economic climate impacting your part of the ecosystem? Who wants to go?
Oh yeah, I guess
You're
that
the
was
tallest.
that was a subtle message. It's still tough out there if you are a company trying to raise money, as many of you who are precisely doing that right now are experiencing. So I think Philly, right or wrong, the region got swept up in this giant biotech euphoria that we had in 2020, 2021 with, it was fueled by a number of things. And now things continue to be quite depressed. So I think there is some hope out there. There are some signs that things are turning. The public markets are beginning to crack open again. Of course, it didn't help that the one company that went public had just a phase 3 failure. But eventually, it's part of business in biotech. There are booms and busts. And so we'll return by... The general understanding is that we will return to a more normal state of things by mid of next year, and things will pick up again in the Philadelphia region also. So I guess the way it impacts my business as an investor is just to continue to work with the companies that approach us, making them understand that we're no longer in a very permissive financing environment, that the business plan needs to be lean and just very to the point. It's probably not the time to build a whole manufacturing capability if you are a preclinical company, but it's part of the process of moving forward in biotech. So there is hope out there. Just hang in for maybe 6 to 9 months more.
Yeah, look, I think it's twofold. It's simple. You need good science. And you need money to support those companies. So just some real quick stats. So I started focusing on this in the business in late 2020. Started tracking deal flow in the marketplace. In January of 21, there were 2 million square feet of R&D requirements out in the market, 100 companies. January 22, that dropped down to about 75 companies and about 1.6 million of activity. January 23, that dropped down to about 60 companies at about 1.3 million square foot of demand. Last quarter, we do it every quarter, so call it the end of June, it was roughly 30 companies and about 800,000 square feet, and if those companies were honest with themselves, most of that would actually be on hold. So significant change in demand. But what's interesting about it is in January 21 and January 22, 50% of those prospects looking for space in this market came from other locations outside Philadelphia. The driver behind that was probably, most likely in my opinion, anecdotally, demand in space in Boston, the Triangle, Northern California, so significant. One, you couldn't find space. Two, the pricing was going really high. Three, you couldn't get talent. And if you got the talent, you probably had an attrition rate of hitting close to 30%. So for every 100 people you had to replace 30 every year because they were being stolen by other spots. And that's reflective, Matthew kind of touched on earlier, but we were fortunate enough to be 100% leased at B Labs when we opened up. They were much more mature companies than we expected. We thought we'd have 20 to 30 companies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 benches. We ended up with 12 different companies, anywhere from 1 bench to 54. 42% of those companies and the people in those seats, 240 seats, came in from out of town. So what happened? You can now find space in Boston. You can now know that your rent's not going to go up every month. You can find people, and the steal rate or attrition rate isn't as significant. So now we're dealing with about 15% of the demand I mentioned earlier coming from outside this market. So we can't be successful if we're strictly going to rely on the fact that other markets had an over demand and that drove traffic here. So there's that balance between the private equity, the science, all the different organizations that Matthew and Lou deal with to try and develop that science. There's an opportunity for us to kind of catch up, build the base, and then that's why Brandywine created that platform from incubator stage to graduate labs to enterprise stage, along with teaming up with Lorenzo so he can invest money. Matthew can decide which companies to put in and help them develop. We've got service organizations like MeesPro and others. So that it's a full complement. So if you're out there and you want to be in space, you can work with somebody, a collective team that can handle you from infancy all the way through maturity.
Excellent. Q&A, or did you have one?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, look, I would just like to emphasize, I think Philadelphia needs to creating vehicles so that they own their own future. We can't always rely on a lack of space or expensive space or a sudden influx of available talent, all of which have kind of happened in the last 12 months. But I do agree with Lorenzo, in 6 to 12 months, you're going to have space available. You're going to have a very large talent pool in other geographies that used to be a benefit to Philadelphia. I think creating vehicles and relationships where Philadelphia owns its future in this sector will be highly beneficial.
Do we have time, Nancy, for a couple questions? Okay. Questions?
Well, we were either that boring or that comprehensive. Which was it?
We got someone over.
You talked about the key ingredients in Philadelphia proper. Can you talk a little bit about the broader region and what that offers and where you see some of the attractiveness, especially when we talk about a state level play, just thinking a little beyond the direct metro area?
I mean, I think if you look at states like what Massachusetts did, it actually diffused from Boston and Cambridge out to Northern Shore, 20, 30 miles out. I also think one of our difficulties as a state is that, just being transparent, Pittsburgh and Southeast really are producing most of the IP and the patents and the ideas, and the other parts of the state have their strengths. You got IT in Harrisburg, Scranton's got Geisinger. It's tough to convince a legislator in Erie or Center County that going all in on life sciences is the play. So I think we have to do better messaging. I think we have to say that there's GMP, there's other services associated with what we do, from restaurants to security to all kinds of different, from hotels. That, I'll tell you, we had an economic impact study done in Doylestown. The last 5 years, the impact on not just Doylestown, but the state was $7.3 billion. So we've got to start talking that language, that this is an inclusive investment, life sciences. It's not just bench jobs. So I hope that answered your question. You guys good? Anyone else? There's one over in the middle, and there's one over there.
Hi, I know that we spent a lot of time talking about, developing the fundamental base of life science in Philadelphia market. I just wanted to get an idea of where we are in terms of the more maturation of it. As we go from your accelerators to your incubators into something bigger. Right now, I know that a lot of the focus is getting that base set, but we also probably should think forward to the future of manufacturing and eventually, hopefully, commercialization. Philadelphia being an old town, our old city, has its disadvantages in terms of buildings of themselves. Are their infrastructure strong enough to be able to hold that level of commercialization or CGMP? So my question is, what can we do to address that, and what is currently kind of the plans to foster that growth?
Guys?
Yeah, so we approach every situation from the perspective of the investor. So activities will be promoted if they give us a good ROI. So we are probably not the best people to have that discussion. I think one of the advantages that Boston had over Philadelphia historically was that they had large biotech companies already resident there. So they had Biogen and Genzyme, and they were building their environment there, across all the various sectors of the value generating process, right? And we don't have that quite yet. We have Spark, which is great, but ideally 5-10 years down the road, we would like to have some of those complete companies that also touch on the other aspects. I don't know if anybody else wants to add here.
That's good.
I think we kind of covered some of it, but it's like to pick up on Matthew's comment earlier. I think what made Boston so successful was its density of operations, and it just, fortunately enough for them, had the support of 2 universities, not necessarily just one with more resources potentially than we have locally. And then, our big story, as Lorenzo mentioned, Spark Therapeutics, but that was in 2018. We need to create some more Spark Therapeutics and then create that density, and that energy pushes upon itself. And then you have people who leave Spark and go start their own companies, and so on and so on. So it's, it fundamentally comes down to, once again, good science. To Lorenzo's point, you need a management team that can help develop that, but then you need the money to support that entire sector. And we, as Matthew said, we have to control our own destiny. And if we have all the people at the table, or we have all the people, we just need to get them to sit down at the table and communicate better.
I think we're out of time, so thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Sorry.